All right, hello, folks. I'm Jeff Gonzales, host of the Bulletproof Workshop, powered by AR15.com. Welcome to Podcast 004. There's something about storytelling that I love. The messages stories convey can impact us in many different ways, from childhood through adulthood. Today's guest continues to serve off the battlefield through the cinema, the ultimate art of storytelling. I had the privilege of attending the premiere of a new movie, Warhorse One, last night, and it was awesome. Please welcome to the show, fellow SEAL, Johnny Strong, actor, composer, and now producer.
Wow, thank you.
Very good. Welcome to the show, Johnny.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time. And speaking of time, take a quick pause here to thank our sponsors.
Protecting loved ones and neighbors is a high calling. Over the last few years, men and women of all walks of life have chosen to exercise their Second Amendment right as first-time gun owners. Through education and training, families and communities are empowered to protect themselves and those around them. Daniel Defense advocates for individuals' rights to bear arms, which is why they manufacture 100% American-made, high-quality firearms backed with a lifetime warranty. To learn more, visit DanielDefense.com.
All right, so I like to start off the podcast by just getting to know the guest as far as, like, where did you grow up? Like, what kind of childhood did you have?
I grew up in Los Angeles.
Ooh, right on.
So I was on Detroit and 3rd Street in Los Angeles, playing on the back of my dad's 73 Stingray Corvette.
Ooh.
So that was cool.
That does sound cool.
Yeah.
73 was a good year.
Yeah. Just grew up in Hollywood. My parents were in the business, and my dad was like a producer and a Hollywood enforcer, and yeah, that's it.
What does that mean?
So,
another story.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms here. Yeah, so I grew up out there, and
so your childhood definitely played a part in your future career path. Then it sounds like.
Sure, yeah. I remember one of the auditions I had was for E.T.
No way.
When I was like a kid, my first job was when I was 5 years old. I was modeling cowboy clothes on this like morning TV show.
Get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
That is so cool. So you grew up in LA, also probably grew up in a golden era to be in California when.
Oh, was it? Yeah, well, it was like a little bit. The 80s was just amazing.
I know, right? That's what
The 80s was awesome, man. And it was, the only thing that sucked was like you couldn't see like 200 yards in the sky. It was just smog everywhere.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah, it was brutal.
That must have been the only bad thing. Yeah, we had some other guests that kind of grew up in the same era as us that grew up in California, and you know, the beauty, the fun, the adventure that they had as kids. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. I remember the bicycle was like everything.
You lived on your bike.
That was your lifeline.
Yes, it was. You know, it's so funny too, because growing up as a kid here, I lived in a small town, but to get anywhere, you know, my parents worked. So if I wanted to go someplace, it was on a bike. So like you said, the lifeline for my adventure was on those pedals.
Oh yeah, dude.
And it, dude, it took me so many places. Probably places that I shouldn't have gone, but definitely was one of those rare treats that I cherish. Now, you know, looking back at it, you know, as a kid, you don't really appreciate that. But now, man, dude, that was just like so impacting on my life.
Yeah.
It kind of broke the mold as far as like getting out there, getting dirty, getting messy.
Where on the East Coast?
So I grew up here in, well, not here in Austin, but down in
Bernie,
San Antonio, just outside of San Antonio, Bernie.
Yeah.
And dude, we just go right in the hills, just these
I bet.
massive fields, but for all the build up and all the suburbia kind of encroached out there.
Sure.
We just ride and to get anywhere, because I lived in such kind of like a, you know, smaller place. If you wanted to go someplace fun and have a good time to do something, you were going to have to pedal like hours.
Oh yeah.
It was like you had to really.
But you know, it's weird back then. Mentally, you don't even register that, man.
No.
It's just I have to go to 7-Eleven. At least for me, where I was, it was like I got to get to 7-Eleven. You didn't even think about like, oh man, that's a bitch to drive that far.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, sorry.
No worries.
It was like, you know, you drive, you ride, and it didn't matter how far it was. It was just we got to go play Street Fighter at 7-Eleven. Like it was like this weird thing. And your brain doesn't, you know, as you know, kids, they don't they don't even calculate that into the equation. It's only, I think that, like, in my experience, that people that, as they get older, all of a sudden things get calculated. Oh man, I can't go there because this is going to take like this and this.
That's
you know
a
what I mean?
good point. Yeah, like
Kids have a different understanding of that. You know?
and maybe time isn't even a perspective as a kid. At least for me, like I didn't measure things in like minutes per se.
Yeah.
It was more like hours.
Well, I think there's some sort of scientific thing about the mindset of a child and their concept of time. Whereas when a certain period kicks in, then you start going, oh man, I'm this old and I only have this much time left. You know?
I do remember that. Like I do know what you're talking about. Here's another funny part about growing up and riding bikes all the time is that you know when you're out and about and you're just physical. You're just physical. You know, that was my childhood, was to get anywhere required effort on my part.
Sure.
To do stuff.
Sure.
You know, it wasn't just dropping off at the mall with my parents and having to get picked back up.
Yeah,
I'd have to ride my bike to the mall, which, you know, back then I would measure
mall,
it.
dude.
Yeah, I'd measure it by how many hours is it going to take for me to ride my bike there, and then
Right.
do I want to put the effort in?
Yeah, or it's like, can I get there, do what I want to do, and then get home by the time I need to get home so I don't get my ass whooped?
Exactly. Yes.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean, because that factored into it. It's like, I'm going to get there in time, but then I'm going to have like 5 minutes to hang out before I got to haul ass back home.
Yeah, man.
All right, so that was awesome. So grew up in LA, family kind of had a direct impact in your career path to some extent.
Sure.
Other than riding bikes, what else did you do as a kid?
I mean, everything. I was a ninja in training.
Ninja in training.
Yeah, man. I you know, the 80s had a huge impact, just like all the other dudes that I know that grew up during that time period, you know. I had aspirations of becoming a ninja, and I remember I went to I think it was Predator. It was like opening night in Westwood, and Carl Weathers was there, and all these people were there, and I think even Arnold was there. Like, it was like a big deal, you know. And I remember watching that movie and going, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be that dude, Dutch, doing some kick-ass shit. I went home. I went with my father that night, and I went in my room and I started just pumping iron, dude. In my room, I had these little like bullshit weights that my stepmom, you know, had. You know, as a young man, but I was just crushing it, and I was like, "That's what I'm gonna do." It's a strange thing, you know. Life is. You know, I wrote something for this movie that I just did, Warhorse One, where it says, I don't know if things happen for a reason.
Right.
If it's fate, destiny, or the hand of God.
Right.
This force has always been in my life.
Yeah.
You know, where I can't tell you what it is. I can't explain it. Some people say it's this God or that God or this thing or that thing. I don't know what it is. I know it exists. I know it's real because I've experienced it.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
I think that's the thing at the end of the day that is some people, you know, maybe follow one doctrine or the other, but have never really been touched by it. You know, maybe they just feel like they're doing it because they have to, or because they've been told to, or
right.
maybe they were brought to church or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it might be as a kid or whatever. But man, there's magic in this life, and I've felt it, and I equate it to being in the current.
Living in the now.
The current is moving.
Oh, the current. Oh, I got
the
you.
current
I got you.
is
I got you.
moving, you know? And if you fight the current, you're going to have problems.
For sure.
Especially over a long period of time.
Absolutely.
You know? And at some point in my life, I just decided to let the current be the current, and I'll be the force within the current and allow that to happen. And my life has led me down this path where, as a kid, all the things I wanted to do, like be a rock star and a movie star and a fucking ninja and all these things, I've accomplished them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just manifest or whatever that is, It just happened.
I think a lot of it has to do with, your belief in those ideas. You believed in them, that you wanted them for yourself, and that became a reality.
Yeah.
Became that manifest destiny in a sense.
When I truly believe, like, I have a problem of projecting that on people a lot of times. People in my life that, maybe they play music or maybe they do this or that. And I go, man, why don't you make a record? Or why don't you go make a movie? Or why don't you go oh, well, I can't do that because of this or that or the other. And it boggles my mind because everything I've ever wanted to do or be successful at has come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just because I am so stubborn.
Probably has a little bit to do with it.
You know what I mean? But
there's a bit of determination that really helps.
Determination. Yeah,
like, you can be, it's one thing to be spinning your wheels, but it's another thing to have that focus and let that be your guide to where you want to go. And I have a similar kind of experience on my end because I did the same thing. My dad again told me, keep banging your head against the wall. You're not going to get an outcome. You eventually need to take a step back and listen to some of these other people that have already walked the walk and can give you that guidance. So it took me some time to find the flow that you're describing. But once I did, I have found that if I just, hey, it's laid in my path for some reason. I don't know what the reason is.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm enjoying nowadays. I'm at a point in my life where I'm enjoying it.
Oh yeah.
More.
Well, yeah.
Just, hey, whatever. If it brings me happiness, great. If it doesn't bring me happiness, move on.
Sure. I think that's a strange aspect of part of our programming that somehow the established authority has programmed us to think, well, you're not supposed to like it. It's a weekday. You go to work, and then we'll give you these 2 days to take off. And then that could be your pleasure or this holiday or whatever. And if you really step back and look at it and go, man, what a strange prison planet, that we're kind of just slaving away for this hierarchy out there. And I think the more disconnected from that you get and you kind of just allow yourself to be in the current, you start to enjoy it more. You start to see things as like, yeah, this is great, man. I took the other day I took a nap that was like 4 hours. And it was just beautiful. Just the nap, whereas like I was programmed, I'm sure like other people, that no, you gotta do this, you gotta work, you gotta do this,
feel like, guilty or shamed about it.
It's a weird thing, man. Yeah. Like we should all be enjoying this life. You get one life, and it's a magic experience. And the fact that people are like, I remember sitting on the freeway one day, dude, in Los Angeles. And the traffic was unreal. Ugh. And I looked next to me, and there was this woman in her car, and she just had this look of just complete acquiescence, like, yeah, my life is shit. Yeah. I'm stuck in traffic, and I was like, oh my God, I can't let that be my life. You know what I mean?
I do. Did you find, like, as you're growing up, did this begin at a younger age, or did you start to see, when did you start to find this flow, this current? Do you think it was began?
I'll tell you what, it's a strange thing. As soon as I stopped watching TV, I'm telling you, stop listening to the radio, stop.
There's a lot of lessons to be learned there.
There's a ton of programming input that comes in that people don't even realize it. When you're sitting in an elevator and that music's going on, or you're driving in your car and you're listening to a song, but then there's 2 minutes of commercials. This is all programming.
Yeah.
And I think when I unplugged from that and just was like, I'm going to spend my time doing the stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
Your brain starts to disconnect from that. And you're not influenced by things that is artificial influence. It's more, I spend time with friends that I like, people that I enjoy their company.
Yeah.
I listen to my music and like maybe a few other things, but, and I think things naturally change in your mind. you know?
Well, I do know what you're saying. I was curious if like there was something in your childhood that kind of started this search.
I don't
was
know.
it like
It's
maybe the
always
martial
been
arts or
well,
the
sure. I mean,
music,
I'll tell you, like Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon. That was a huge one for me, bro. You know, I was like, and my concept though of a ninja or martial arts was of a young man, and then about a quarter of a century ago, I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and
nice.
And and then I started to realize what, single unarmed combat to the death, right?
Yeah.
That concept, that simulated,
yeah,
combat to the death. I realized like, oh, this is real ninja shit. This is like,
absolutely.
the old, and I don't use glass dust or anything to blow in my opponent's eyes like a ninja, or blow darts or whatever the fuck it was, you know what I mean?
Just old school pounding.
Yeah, exactly. But it was like manifesting that or whatever you'd want to call it. What about you? Did you, what got you into being motivated to join the SEALs?
Well, that's a great question. I was athletic and eager to challenge myself.
Yeah.
To find, like, what am I capable of? What's my potential? And I will admit that was a little bit selfish because it took me probably about 5 or 6 years before I recognized the true call in the SEAL teams and any other military profession, which is service.
Sure.
That it took me a while to see that. I lost a lot of teammates. I came in, early on when we were in little hot spots throughout the world. So I lost some teammates early. And that kind of was what triggered that, wait a minute, I'm not in it for me. I'm in it for the guy next to me.
Well, I think that's a natural progression.
It did take time. Like I know some people that's their call and they went in there because they wanted to do that service.
Sure.
It took some time for me to get to
yeah.
that. But my call into the teams was more, I wanted to challenge myself. And I felt at the time they were like,
well, that was the litmus test.
Exactly.
You're either a stud, you're not,
Yeah. You're going to learn quickly.
Sure.
And I see that too. Like again, the experience that you had through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the sense of like learning about yourself. Like that is a true petri dish of
sure.
You're going to learn a lot. And I didn't come to Jiu-Jitsu much later in my life. Like you got it earlier in your life. So, I'm relearning a lot of things that I learned back when I was much younger, but have kind of forgotten.
Sure.
And it's an enjoyable experience, learning and putting yourself in that situation where, like you said, it is the ultimate form of combat. I mean, it's a black and white setting.
Sure. There's a truth that happens. And I think anyone that's been around it for a number of years learns that.
Yeah.
Which is, there's not a lot of artifice involved. There's not a lot of superficial facade that can happen in these moments.
Yeah.
When you look down at your opponent who's suffering in a top dominant position, right? And you're applying a choke to their face and they are struggling for their life. That's the truth. That's looking in the mirror and seeing who you really are.
Man, I'll tell you, I completely agree. There have been 2 major lessons that I've learned from that. Number 1, who am I?
Well, yeah.
Who am I? And then number 2, what am I willing to do on the other side if that choke's being applied to me?
Right.
Who am I on the other side?
Well, yeah. I think that's the, and you'll find this in a lot of MMA and jiu-jitsu schools is some guys, they're hunting for like the low-hanging fruit in the gym.
Yeah.
For me, it was always, oh, dude, that dude's the black belt. I want to roll with him.
Yeah.
That dude's that brown belt that's just smoking everybody with this or
yeah.
I want to roll with him.
So true. And I'm very, very fortunate. I have some amazing athletes to work with that have shared their knowledge and wisdom
Awesome.
by handing me my ass day in, day out, And that's another thing too that I've appreciated about jiu-jitsu is the humility that goes into it.
Sure.
There's a tremendous amount of humility. And I'm sure other martial arts have that. And I've experienced other martial arts. I was a martial artist for a young a young man all the way through. I consider myself still to be that.
Mm-hmm.
But the level of humility that I appreciate when I walk onto the mat, and these guys' experience level, their knowledge base, much, just like I'm here to learn. I walk into there, and no matter how high I get in the rank structure, I try to always walk in onto that mat. Just I'm a white belt,
Sure,
and I'm here to learn.
absolutely. And it goes along with what you were saying is you got into the SEALs to test yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was a selfish initiation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which maybe martial arts was that at some point. I want to kick somebody in the head like Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
for sure.
But I found through my journey is that what is most satisfying to me is making people better.
Yes,
And through making them better, I get better.
100%, dude. I learned that as my final command was at the center as a BUDS instructor, and there were obviously kids that we were trying to get rid of.
Sure.
And there were kids that we're trying to mold to be.
Sure.
And I got a tremendous amount of satisfaction from that. And I was very lucky because my tenure as a BUDS instructor, those students that were graduating were the tip of the spear for Iraq and Afghanistan.
Awesome.
And they went on to do amazing things. And obviously we lost a lot of them, but I was so proud to watch them progress and get to where they were, and all the accolades they achieved, all the success that they achieved. And, that made me better because when I was there, I considered myself a gatekeeper.
Right.
Like, I've got to make sure that those guys that get there to
Sure.
the commands are the best that we could possibly send them. And in that process, I had to do it. And it wasn't easy, let me tell you, because I butted heads with everybody at the command. But I eventually learned that the secret to that all was, what can I do to make this person better?
Right.
So that when they do get to the teams, it reflects good on everybody. And
Right.
and that was like the tough part, because I had to, again, some BUDS instructors can be just, they're just pounders. They just want to pound you into the sand.
That one dude with the mustache on the TV show.
Yeah.
Dude, I forgot his name.
I have too. I know who you're talking
But
about.
man, that dude was great.
Yeah.
It was, funny. But here's a question I have for you.
Go for it.
So the way I run my training program,
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 people I teach.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say that I necessarily teach them, other than I help them develop to become better training partners for me.
Yes.
I think, I'll be honest, right, is I when I left Chris Lissandro's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club, I was his first black belt. I opened up
shit.
I had my own place in Van Nuys, and I started to, I thought I would go down the regular road of becoming a jiu-jitsu instructor,
Fair enough.
right?
Yeah.
And I found as the more I progressed down that road, I found I wasn't a good coach, right? So in my mind, a good coach would be somebody that has 10 people sitting on a bench and treats them all as they all have something to offer,
Mm-hmm.
and puts work into all 10 of them, right?
That's fair.
I find that in my spirit, I look at those 10 people and I say, I see the 3 people that are that all that time and effort is gonna be worth putting into.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, in no way do I mean it in a demeaning way or a way that I don't like people or whatever it is, but I just want to say, hey, you 3 come with me.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of you have a great day. And that's what I've done. And I've made the training in my place, right? We train in a room a little bit bigger than this.
Nice.
It's right next to my house.
Perfect.
And it's like this, I bought this thing and I put it there, and I was like, that's where I'm going to train. And I made the training so difficult and the pressure so difficult that people would just quit. The people that I know are going to quit will just quit.
Yeah.
And the people that have stayed, the 3 consistent people that I train with, I realize that my time and effort is worth putting into these guys.
Right.
And
Totally.
I'm going to ask you,
Go for it.
is that similar, right? Because in my mind, I think, man, if you're going to put these guys, these young dudes, right, in these incredibly difficult situations, right, at war, the ultimate difficult situation,
For sure.
right, then you want to be damn sure that they're prepared for it or that they're capable.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So is that something that the BUDS instructors and the SEAL teams, is that an approach or a similar approach, or do they have a different approach of saying, well, we have a quota of how many guys, or I don't know what it is. So
That's a tough one. And, there is a quota that exists. We all know it. There's numbers that have to be met. And I didn't agree with it at times. I still don't officially agree with it, but
Right.
having been in war for 20 years, I understand it.
right.
Because we did need bodies out there, and
Sure.
and war cost us bodies.
Sure.
So the quota, I reluctantly agreed to,
Okay.
because unfortunately, it's number one, it's the system. It's the way it is.
Yeah.
And then, but number two, it's like you were talking about. I can either buck this, or I could go with it and try to make these guys the very best
Sure.
within
Yeah,
within my small
Yeah.
sphere of influence.
Yeah.
And I feel like I did that. I've talked to several of these guys that have come back, and I feel like, okay, I did. I didn't hit everybody, but the ones that I did hit, it made an impact. And that's at the end of the day, I feel like, okay, that's a win. I'll put that under the win
Now,
column.
would there be a moment, right? Like for me, when I'm teaching my guys, is often I would say early on in their training, I go, listen, if you go home, driving your car home, go, man, Johnny's a fucking asshole. He told me I got to work on my hip escape,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I tell them, I'd rather you go home hating my guts about that,
Yeah.
but I'll go to sleep knowing I told you the truth and knowing I did everything in my power that, to my knowledge,
Yeah.
that's going to make you harder to kill, right?
100%.
And this is one of the things that, in that line of work, right, is the way I think about it with these guys, my guys, is like, I know that the 3 guys that I train, if they were attacked right now, they're capable.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
And if one of them had to rely on the other, they're capable.
Right on. Yep.
And that would be the thing that I think on the teams would be really important to weed out, is people that might be the weak link in the chain,
So it's tough because, as you know, things have gotten politically correct.
Sure.
And that has caused some complications.
Did you find that leaking into the teams?
In my tenure, I felt like there was the beginning of political correctness.
Right.
Like I saw the very beginning of it. I'm so far removed from it now. I live vicariously through guys like Mikey and whatnot. But in my tenure, we started to see the beginning of political correctness, and it makes sense because that was like back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
So you kind of think about the global setting, or at least nationally, what that was kind of looking like there.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because I don't think there's any place for political correctness in our field in particular.
Well, warfare, I've always said, Jeff, that there, because there's rules of engagement, right? And we have these codes, but I've always thought, like, war is, if there's rules in warfare, right, then it's a business.
That's a good way to put it.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. I remember my first exposure to combat was in my very first platoon. And I remember when we got downrange and everything was kicking off, we got orders that we could not use HE.
Right.
Every HE implement that we had to ditch it.
Wow.
And so everything we were going in with was just 5.56 and 7.62.
Right. Yeah.
And it was my first kind of exposure to, I guess you could say, risk aversion and political correctness.
Right.
Both of them. And here we are going to war, and they are now tying one of our hands behind our back.
Yeah.
Removing one of our most devastating components to our warfighting, HE, high explosives, for those of you that don't know.
Yeah.
And And that was like an eye opener. And that I was very fortunate because I had that in my very first deployment and I saw it firsthand. So I kind of kept my eye on things around and I saw things differently because of that. You know, guys that came in during that slow time between my period and then the GWAT, you know, I was very cognizant of that. And like, I really made an effort to make sure that we were not putting ourselves in that type of position that would compromise us, you know, because somebody would make a decision like, all right, you can't use HE.
Right.
Like I always had a hard time swallowing that. That made me angry.
It's a strange thing. So, you know, if I could compare it, right? So when I teach jiu-jitsu, I teach it with striking. So you wear gloves and it's basically like MMA.
Yeah.
And
totally different then.
I implemented it because of my experience working with jiu-jitsu guys. They sometimes they put themselves in situations that aren't conducive to well-being in a fight.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I told my guys, listen, we wear gloves and you punch each other in the face and punch each other and it's going to happen. And I feel like if you put yourself under those circumstances, it's only going to make you stronger. It's only going to make you more resilient. It's going to make you less likely to be shocked when someone punches you in the face.
Well, I 100%, absolutely. Like, and I think it, you know, like, I love the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And it is a sport.
Yep.
You talk to anybody that has been doing it long enough and they understand more than anybody the limitations. And they know how to work within those limitations to still affect the positive outcome.
Sure.
But my point is that, you know, when you start to change the game by adding strikes, you now have to adapt.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the values behind a strategy like adding gloves to the rolls is now, hey, all right, you know, I'm comfortable in a compromising position that would score me good points in jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
But not so much on the streets.
Right. Well, it's so I have this theory of the law of compounding pressures.
Interesting. I'd like to hear more about this.
Okay, so you take an individual, right, without any circumstance, right, and they are at ease, right? Let's just say, and this is, you know, omitting maybe some sort of mental pressure they're putting on themselves, which we'll get to in a minute.
I like that.
So you have this individual at ease, and then you say, okay, we're going to put you in this room and have you start digging a hole in the ground, right? And then you turn the air conditioner off. And then you start shouting at him like, hey, go fucking faster, dig the hole. And then you start throwing some of the rocks that he's chipped away, you start throwing at him. Now all of a sudden you have an individual under compounding pressures.
I got you now.
Right?
Yeah.
So I feel, right? So when I train my guys, it's this little box and I close all the windows and I turn the heater all the way up.
Oh.
So it's usually like a sauna. You know?
Oh my God.
And then you know, after a good hour and a half of training, you come out of there and you feel like, man, life is beautiful.
Right.
Because you've put yourself under multiple forms of pressure.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, and I can totally get it because it's like you're promoting adapting to your circumstances and trying to constantly live up to that adaptation. So, you know, as you close off any, you know, you turn down, you turn up the heat, you start yelling and screaming, you give them a complicated task, and that individual has to learn how to adapt.
Well, this is like the teams, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was going with it.
And you know, I'll tell you what, you know, in a parallel universe, I'm a team guy. Yeah. And I used to do training in my backyard in the pool where I would, first of all, I bought this Navy SEAL pull-up book. that was at Big Five, a sporting goods
I think
store.
I remember that
Dude,
book.
these two dudes on it,
Yeah.
like all yoked up.
Yeah. I do
And
remember that one.
Chris, my jiu-jitsu coach, was like, man, check this book out. You got to get it. So I went down, I got it. And it was all pyramid push-ups.
Yeah.
pyramid
I
push-ups
remember that
and
one.
sit-ups and pull-ups and stuff. And so I religiously did it in my backyard. And I put weights and combination locks. And so you'd walk 50-pound, 250-pound weights to the deep end. You walk back, you swim back, then
Damn.
you go back, then you put the padlocks on them, then you go back, and then you come back, you undo the locks. This is all underwater, holding your breath. So I did my own form of this kind of compounding pressure stuff
Yeah.
in my training.
Yeah. Was this before you went to the Navy?
I didn't go to the Navy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I played Navy SEALs in movies.
Gotcha.
But no, the only time, there's a lot of guys that have these stories. Oh man, I would have joined, but I would have killed my instructor. All this kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
I was sitting at a restaurant, going through a divorce, and I was at a point in my life where I was like, man, you know what? I should just go join the SEALs.
Okay.
And there was a Navy recruiting center on Ventura Boulevard, and it was right down the street from this restaurant, the Good Earth, that I was eating at.
Yeah.
And I was eating the same meal I would always eat there, this coconut smoothie or whatever the fuck And this woman that was always my waitress was there, and she's like, oh, what's wrong? And I was like, oh, nothing, I'm fine. Life's great. I was just brushing it off.
Yeah.
And then I got a text on a BlackBerry that I had.
That's dating it.
Come on, man. I'm an old man. And it was like, hey, there's this movie. You got to go to Universal. And I went, and it was the Fast and Furious. And that derailed my game plan of going to the teams.
So that one, I'm so glad you brought that up, because first of all, I love that movie.
Okay,
dude, and your character was so awesome. It was that, I think, was like one of the there's movies that kind of leave a mark on you, and that movie was one of the things that I liked about that movie was it displayed like family and teamwork all together in a unique setting where you guys, aside from the sister brother scenario, there was just you all together working as a very finely tuned
and for
machine.
a team guy, that's like ultimate.
That's right, exactly. You were working like a finely tuned machine, and and I did dig that movie. I kind of I can't keep track of all of them now. There's like I don't even know how many there are.
I'll be honest, I've only seen the first one twice. That I was in.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of the other movies.
Dude, I wanted to keep going with it, but there's just so many nowadays. It's hard. Time is money in a sense also. So was that
But that was the decision, dude.
Yeah.
Like, listen, and you can ask any of my boys that are SF guys or team guys. I'm down to get down.
Yeah.
I love it. I do probably, I don't have the regimental training, I'd say, that like, Buds has. Like, it's like this week is this way, this week is this way.
Yeah, it's very regimented.
It's like I'm a full PT, full time, all the time.
Dude.
I'm doing firearms training. I'm doing fight training. Like, it's part of my, I don't know if it's epigenetics or what it is, man, because there are times where, I look around in this room. No, you're good. And we're all sweating and we're all beat up and it's crazy. And I go, why do we do it? Why do you show up?
Yeah.
And put yourself through this? Is there some sort of calling where maybe, a few thousand years ago, we were on a hillside with spears, looking across a valley at another hillside of people with spears, and we're like, we're gonna fucking take these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
There must be something in the genes or something that makes you do it, or maybe it's the influence of your childhood, or
it's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of things wrapped up into it, and like I think there's a certain mindset that I feel folks like that are attracted to. I think it's also a gravitational pull of sorts. Like, not everybody's made to do that. And what I mean by that is the genetics aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? Like whether or not you pursue this career path, the commonality is that there's that gene that you're talking about that guides each of them in their own way, in their own path.
Sure.
And one of the things that I recognized is that, Buzz wasn't for everybody. And despite their best intentions, they were better off in another field. And that's not a bad thing, because in the end, I want the best candidate for the community.
Sure.
But I also want you to be happy with where you're at.
Yeah, sure.
Wherever you were. And that was the hardest part I had to do, was try to, talk some kids off the ledge there and say, hey, listen, your life is going to go on. You're going to do fine. You're going to find your path, and it's going to be, you can't, don't let this destroy your life. It's just, you tried this, it didn't work.
Right.
Move on to the next goal.
That's a hard thing to muster. I often, man, when I get, emails from people like, hey, is it cool if I train with you or whatever? Yeah. And I know it would be like driving down the street and just throwing money out the window for me of time and energy, And what do you say? Like, how do you convince somebody that's like, I'm going to be the next MMA fighter. And you're like, man, you're not even dedicated enough to get through a white belt. Like, I don't know how to be. And the thing is I wonder, Jeff, am I, in Sparta, would it just be like, get lost?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So.
And is that something, that, and this is what I'm really curious about nowadays with all of this political correct kind of weird inclusion, strange society thing that's happening right now, which I think is completely manipulative. If you go throughout the rest of the world, a lot of that is not happening.
Right.
We're told that it's happening. This is a global shift, but it's not. It's bullshit.
I agree.
This is a very, very small minority of people using the biggest megaphone to make it seem like it's big.
100%.
And one of the things that is important for everyone to remember is the key to changing things is the subversive tactic of making what is normal seem abnormal and what is abnormal seem normal.
Huh.
So
I'm
if
tracking with what you're saying.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It took me a while to kind of put my, really put it on, but I do hear what you're saying. Like,
for instance.
Yeah, give me, I was just going to say.
For instance, in a decade on the teams.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's okay that if these guys can't do this, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not fucking normal. You changed it.
Yes.
And you slowly changed it so that no one realized you changed it.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, that's it, man.
I totally get what you're saying.
And this is happening in society right now with almost everything.
Everything. It's the little, like somebody or most people would notice a major shift and they'd be like, stop that shit right now. Yeah. But those little bitty steps that most of the time go unnoticed. And here's what I also think a lot of times. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, that's so small and insignificant.
Well, yeah, that's like a grain of sand that causes an avalanche.
Exactly. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's
Sure.
Eventually, when you add enough of those little steps, it's the tipping point.
Sure.
And that happens.
Protecting loved ones and neighbors is a high calling. Over the last few years, men and women of all walks of life have chosen to exercise their Second Amendment right as first-time gun owners. Through education and training, families and communities are empowered to protect themselves and those around them. Daniel Defense advocates for individuals' rights to bear arms, which is why they manufacture 100% American-made, high-quality firearms backed with a lifetime warranty. To learn more, visit danieldefense.com.
So I got to get back because I'm definitely a fan of your career in Hollywood, and I'm curious. Like, you obviously had the family kind of like track to set you there. Did your father and mother help get you there, or?
Sure, I think it was. They realized that I was a talented guy, and they fostered that. Career path in a way, being in the movie industry. And
because you hear about so many failures. You know, people that go out to LA and they fail.
You know, this is an interesting thing. You know, there are so many comparisons of the teams and everything else.
Yeah.
In my life, like I always can, you know, say, oh, you know, this reminds me of that, and you can make that comparison. So in Hollywood, it's very cliquey.
Yeah.
Right. And
I mean, I don't know. I'm taking your word for it.
Well, you know, think about the teams as like there are guys that are like part of this clique.
Yep.
Part of that clique. They're they're all team guys.
Yeah. Yep. I got you.
You know, and you know, like I said, I had some auditions when I was younger, and I did. I worked on things as a kid, and then went through the the preteen phase, and then I dropped out of high school.
Ooh.
And the first job I got after I dropped out in Hollywood, I was making submarine sandwiches when I was 16. But I got a job on America's Most Wanted as a guy that, I auditioned for the bad guy, right? Which was a smaller part. But the guy was like, hey man, you're a really good actor. You should play the bigger part of the victim. And I was like, okay, cool. So I ended up playing the victim, and it was a huge case that actually the episode that I was on broke, and they caught the guys.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that is
Pretty
so cool.
right?
Yeah, that is wicked cool. So that, like, Hollywood is like that best kept secret. Nobody really understands how it works. Like you're an insider, if you will.
Sure.
And you've done some great films. Like I'm not gonna lie, the Fast and the Furious was by far, I think, my favorite, just because I liked the.
What about Black Hawk Down?
Well, I loved that, I loved that movie, but that's a totally different movie, in my opinion. An equally impacting movie, and I wanted to talk to you about that as well, because that's close to home in a sense. You know,
sure.
I favored the Fast and the Furious, and I feel like the reason why I did was because you guys were all part of a team.
You're a big Vin Diesel fan, right?
Not really. I mean, you know, honestly, not so much. I actually, not so much. I like him, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
yeah.
The Black Hawk Down to me was, you know, and like that one really hit home, and that strikes a chord for me just simply because of so many unrelated to the actors, not the actors, but the soldiers on the ground.
Sure.
The mistakes that were made and the continued mistakes that we make. So
sure.
It's hard for me to, like, I look at that movie and I'm thankful for it because it brought to the surface a lot of things. First of all, the amazing guys that were part of that, you know, and I know a lot of them over the years. I've come to know some of them. I knew some of them even back then when I was in the Navy. But here's an interesting question that I had for you. What was it like to play a Medal of Honor winner?
I'll tell you what, just like you said, of getting in the SEALs for selfish reasons, right?
Okay.
This was a similar thing for me.
Interesting.
When you're coming up as an actor, one of the things that is, how do I put it? You always want, you know, you have the monument, like if you were going through buds and you had this instructor and you were like, that dude's the fucking shit, I want to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, a good example, when I was a young man, thinking about going to the SEALs was Richard Marchenko.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
So he was a dude. I was like, dude, that dude's a fucking bad dude.
Yeah,
like that's who I want to be, right?
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
So you have that as an actor as well. You go, oh man, Tom Cruise is a fucking badass. Or you go, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. Like for me in the 80s growing up, you had one of my favorites, which often gets overlooked, is Harrison Ford. And why I think he's different than Sylvester and Arnold and all these other dudes is because he plays a character that people can relate to.
Yes.
He's not a massive bodybuilder that you'll never look like.
Right.
Right? He's not a dude who talks like this, you know? you know, punching meat bags, you know? He's just a dude. And he uses his heart and his mind and his spirit in his characters
Yeah.
to overcome these situations,
Right
right?
on. Absolutely.
So it's a really special thing. So anyways, you have these people that you look up to as actors, right?
Right.
But you don't start like that. You start as dude who's sitting drinking water at the table.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or in my case, it was, I forget the guy's name, but the dude who had a cousin who kidnapped him and his girlfriend and killed his girlfriend and him, right?
Wow.
So for me, it was one of those things that you're always working towards something.
I like
you know
it.
what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, obviously their bravery and acts of courage are memorialized by that movie, but playing them is playing one of those characters.
Well, here, yeah. So let me finish. So
Sorry.
So no, it's all right. So you have this aspiration. So even I remember being in Black Hawk Down, and I'll tell you a great story about that.
Please.
Okay. And this goes back to what I was saying about fate and destiny. I had just ordered that got delivered from weightvest.com, a 50-pound weight vest. Okay?
Right on.
And this is when I was doing my own UDT in my backyard.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, oh, my 50-pound vest came in. I put all 50 these weights in the
the one you're
vest and
talking
shit.
about, yeah.
And I start doing pull-ups and I'm getting hammered. Like push-ups, pull-ups, air squats with the vest and shit. And I'm just getting toasted by this thing. Right?
I love it.
And in the background on my television in my living room is a show on History Channel. And I think it was called Deadliest Missions or Suicide Missions. I forgot what it was, the actual term.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I'm not watching it, but it's in the background. And while I'm working out, I hear a story about 2 Delta snipers that get dropped off. They asked to be dropped off
Right on.
at a helicopter crash site.
Mm-hmm.
And they went in and protected the pilot and the crew as long as they could until they were overcome and killed. And I remember while I was working out, Jeff, I started crying. And it was so impactful. And it's so strange to say that. I'm not a pussy by any stretch of the imagination, you know? And I don't think it's a bad thing if men are in tune with their emotions, right?
Absolutely.
But man, I was moved, like in a way that I can't explain. And I said it out loud. I said, man, I need to do that in a movie.
That's so...
Listen, I'm not fucking with you, Jeff. This was magic. This
I
was
believe it.
magic. This was the current. So, and because I said, I could do that. I could show the world that moment in time
Yes.
and express that on film. I knew it. I fucking knew it.
Well, you did a fantastic job, first of
Well,
all.
I appreciate that. But that's, I think that's a side effect of the... So 2 years later, or maybe not 2 years later, this was a little bit after that, I got called in for a movie called Pearl Harbor.
No way.
And the woman, Bonnie Timmerman, one of the best, if not the best casting agent in Hollywood, she is the best, called me in. And I sat in her office and I told her all the reasons why I didn't want to do Pearl Harbor. Because I didn't think the script was very good. I thought it was a kind of shitty attempt to push a World War II story into a Titanic story and make it a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And that was my own personal thing. And I was like, listen, I love that you're thinking of me for the part, but I'm not interested.
It's not the right one.
And she said, okay, I understand. You're the only actor in Hollywood that doesn't want to do it. But okay. And she goes, but I will be doing a Ridley Scott movie that you might be right for at some point in the next year or so. I'll let you know. I said, okay, great. Love you. Take care. A couple years go by, or maybe a year. I forget the timeline. But I remember being on the set of The Fast and Furious. And I was walking to my trailer and Vin Diesel sitting there. He goes, Johnny, I'm reading this script. You'd be really good for it. And I go, what is it? And he goes, it's called Black Hawk Down. I'm not really right for it, but you'd be good for it. And I go, okay, cool, man. And I walked by his trailer. I didn't even stop, I just walked by his trailer, went to my trailer, and I fucking pull out my BlackBerry or whatever I had at the time, and I texted my manager, and I was like, hey, there's something called Black Hawk Down. I don't know what it is. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
I wasn't putting anything together here, so they call, and Bonnie's like, yes, for sure. We're doing these preliminary castings. We're going to bring him in, da, 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 da. And so they sent me a breakdown. You ever heard what a breakdown is?
Not
okay, a
really.
breakdown is basically, it's called the breakdown services. And they have all the characters of all the movies. So it like says Jeff's Big Adventure,
Okay.
lead character.
Gotcha.
Jeff Gonzales. He's a badass dude with gray hair and a chiseled body, whatever the fuck, right?
Yeah.
45 to play 50, whatever the fuck,
Yeah.
right? So, and it gives you all the characters. So I'm looking at the characters,
Okay.
and most of them are like so-and-so Ranger, so-and-so Ranger,
Yeah,
so-and-so
yeah.
Ranger. And then I read, Delta Operator, and I go, ooh, that sounds fucking dope.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
And I see this, and I'm like, okay. And I tell my manager, I said, man, I want to be one of the Delta Operator guys. And they said, no, well, they're only reading actors, the scene where the young Ranger is bleeding out from his femoral artery
Yep.
as the audition scene.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, well, fuck, I'm a pretty decent actor. If I go in there and I do it right, I'm probably going to get that. So I was like, I'm going to go in and read it like a CAG guy.
Fair enough. Smart move. Yeah.
Because that's what I was gunning for. And so I go in and I'm like, Bonnie, how are you? Da-da-da. We sit down and we get on tape, like cameras and stuff.
Yeah.
And we go through the scene and I do it like I envision a CAG guy would do it,
And it's awesome.
And
man.
then after we're done, she's like, Johnny, that was really good, but you're 18. You're young and you're dying and you're really worried about this. And I go, oh, got it. Okay, yeah, let's do it again. I did it the exact same way. I did it like I envision a dude who's, fighting through it would do it, right? Who's been through the type of training, experience, knowledge that how he would be in that moment.
Right on.
Right?
Yep.
That's how I imagined it. And I left and I didn't hear anything. And I was like, And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call. Johnny, do you have your passport? North Africa. You got the movie. And I was like, well, what movie? And Black Hawk Down. I was like, oh, shit. I go, well, what's the role? And they said, we'll fax it over. And they faxed over the one page of these two characters. And it was Delta Sniper, Randy Shugart.
Nice.
At that moment, Jeff, I'm not kidding you. The magic hit and went, oh my God.
Flashback.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
I was sitting in my room and this is the story
That is crazy.
that I heard. And I had projected it to the universe that that's what I'm going to do. That's what I should be the guy to do that. Fucking so strange.
That is right. First of all,
so strange.
But that's that kind of that's that kind of positivity that you throw forward that that it circles back. Now, so once you realize that you got the part that you had wanted 2 years earlier,
right. So I go right,
That
and
must have been-
I take it, and to me it has meaning, right? But I'm still a young actor, so I'm still in my 20s, and I'm still like, and I'm still fighting to in the terms of like not realizing the big picture.
Okay.
So you're there. I want to see if I can make it through buds. Not I want to be the best human being I could be and use my abilities for good.
Okay.
Right? So I'm still there a little bit, but then we shoot the movie. It's a big deal. I take it serious. I dig more into Bowden's book, or Bowden, however.
I said Bowden. That's
Yeah.
how I said it too.
I remember specifically, he said, well, the instrument, the bow, it's spelled bow. Anyway,
Whatever.
Bowden, right? I dug into it and I found out more about these guys, and it brought more meaning into it for me.
Wow.
And then I remember going to the premiere, dude, and there's generals and all these people, ex-CAG guys, and just beautiful people, right?
Yeah.
And we watched the movie, and impacts me in a way that nothing ever has.
Really?
In the movie business.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Life stuff.
Well,
There's some equal stuff in life, but in the movie business. And I realized what an honor it was and how important it is to treat that with respect.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these Rangers didn't. Actors.
Yeah.
You know, some of them were like, I remember specifically, dude Josh, sitting by the pool one day, and he goes, man, I can't wait to get back to Hollywood to do some real acting.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking, you fucking douchebag. Like, what a fucking cunt. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to upset somebody by saying that. But,
Oh, not at all.
But to me, it was one of those things that I was like, man, you have no fucking, like, you have no understanding of how
what we're doing
important
here.
this is.
Yeah.
How important it is. And it has true meaning. And then he ended up, like, going back to Hollywood to do, like, Hollywood Cop or some dog shit movie or whatever it was called.
Oh, yeah. I know the one you're talking
And
about.
Harrison Ford thought he was a big piece of shit.
Oh,
and
that's
I was
right.
like,
He was Harrison
yeah,
Ford in that one.
yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So anyways, I was like, yep, that dude's a piece of shit. I knew it. But anyways, but it was important to me, brother. And I felt like that's what I wanted to do with my life in movies, you know? And not that Fast and Furious isn't a great movie for what it is, it's influenced so many people.
Absolutely.
And it's the biggest movie in movie franchise history.
I don't even know how many there are.
Dude, it's insane, right?
It totally is.
But to me, it was like, that's what I wanted to do. Life should be lived with purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Some people aren't into that. They're I get my Slurpee, I go to this, I do that.
Go through the motions.
I'm not really living, but I'm alive, you know, that type of thing.
Totally get it, man.
And, but it was such an honor. And I just, you know, I'm so thankful and grateful, you know?
Well, first of all, I will say that when I watched that movie, and I watched that part in particular, it's hard because I can remember I was deployed when that all happened and watching the atrocities of, you know, how they treated our soldiers then.
Yeah.
That like when you said that you listened to it on the news, I mean, I was really upset, very upset at that. So when the movie came out, you know, I was kind of I was worried about how they were going to portray it.
Sure.
And it's not like I had any real reason to be worried. It's not like
Hollywood's a strange bitch.
Yeah,
dude.
exactly. So it meant a lot to me what had happened, because that kind of happened on my watch during the Clinton years, you know, when I was in the service, and that was one of the reasons why I left the service. But
well, that's the other thing is I can understand. It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And some of these dudes that I talked to were like, hey, yeah, it's a tragedy, but we only lost 18 dudes, and there's a lot of dudes on the other side that didn't make it. You know, they didn't look at it as the ass whooping that other people looked at it as.
I get that.
It's a strange thing, you know, but I can understand. That's a tough movie to watch. I mean, Warhorse One is a tough movie to watch.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
but I will say this. I've watched it several times since, and every time I do, I'm always grateful that people like yourself, maybe not Josh, but people like yourself put such heart and soul into portraying the characters as true as they possibly could.
Sure.
And I got that from that scene. That scene really resonated with me as well as all the other scenes.
Sure.
But that one really, because I think the two of y'all did such a great job in that. And you could tell that you could tell obviously that you knew what you were doing. You know, there was that too, because sometimes, you know, but
you mean with
the gun handling,
and shooting,
all the tactics, all the stuff that you guys did, and I'm sure, you know, I'm sure there was a lot of other stuff that I didn't pick up on, but to me, that's what made it impacting, is that you did a great job at depicting a very important scene, as far as like we need to remember this.
Sure.
I have a question for you on that.
Go ahead.
So, I've seen several of your movies as well.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've noticed is that, and I watched this last night in the Warhorse One movie,
okay,
which is You have a knack for finding an M14 in your hand.
Oh, yeah. It's a great rifle, man.
I love the rifle, but we, like I saw that, it wasn't your primary that you started with, but somehow or another you managed to get an M14 in your hand.
What a great weapon.
Oh, yeah.
What a great rifle. Very misunderstood, very Cold War.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people say it's the United States version of the AK-47,
Sure, I could see that.
Which is an interesting thing. But, I mean, listen, I've never had issues with the M14s that I use personally.
Yeah.
Although I use more the higher end LRB or Beulah or, stuff that is supposed to be great,
Yeah.
And it is great.
Yeah.
I think that weapons are an interesting thing. And that goes into another thing we were discussing earlier about niche culture of people, like shit talking, like, 1911s or Glocks or whatever, 9mm 45, this type of thing.
Of course.
I have a very sort of practical outlook on that stuff. These are just tools.
For sure.
It's like
100%.
You could have two different Phillips head screwdrivers in front of you.
Yeah.
And have one guy go, oh man, that handle sucks. You need this rubber handle. Or,
Yeah.
For me, I just go, oh, it's just two screwdrivers. They're just gonna screw things in or unscrew things or pry things open or whatever. Dude, I need them to do.
I love hearing you say that because first of all, that it's absolutely true. It's always the adage that I use. It's always the Indian, never the arrow.
Oh, 100%, brother.
You got it.
Always.
It's always going to be that. And I struggle trying to relay that to a lot of newer shooters, trying to get them into the fold. Like, hey,
sure.
It's going to be. It's never.
I think the concept, Jeff, is. Well, if I spend $5,000 on a pistol, I must be a better shooter.
Because I've got a $5,000 gun.
Yeah.
I tell you so many times, I'm like, dude,
crazy.
you can keep dumping money in there and it's going to produce the same results.
Yeah.
This is my dad talking, stop banging your head against the wall and actually take a step back. Wisdom, learn, education.
Man.
So
man.
I love that. And you're right. I think a lot of people do get caught up in those niches, but I couldn't help but notice that.
Man. It's just, I would run one.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is, do what you do well.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Listen, I'll run a AR just like I'll run an M14, a 1911 or a polymer pistol. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I'm I'm the Indian training to be a good Indian.
Yeah.
Whatever the bow, whatever the arrow,
it doesn't matter.
Let's go.
So on that note, last night we were talking after we left, and in a lot of movies in Hollywood, you can tell that the actor may be good at acting, but the actions that they're performing, it's gotten so much better lately.
Sure.
But watching you, like one of the things I was like, he's running those guns hard. And I like seeing that. I like seeing that. There's all these things like, everything from the gun, the way that you were shooting, the all the stuff, everything was like dialed in perfectly as far as I was concerned. I mean, I hated seeing you have to deal with a malfunction, but that was nice.
No, listen, this was, and all respect to Chris at Triarch who supplied the rifles for the movie.
Those were good guns. Yeah.
That was intentional when I was editing the movie.
Okay. Well, I figured
it happens all the time
for sure
in
real life,
real life, and in cinema.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I wanted to show was that, some people might not get that. They go, "Oh, well, the gun malfunction, whatever." The point of that is to show the operator working through a malfunction.
Yeah.
To get the gun
under pressure.
Yeah. To get the gun back online.
Absolutely.
And then to me, what that does is it creates tension.
Yeah.
It creates drama.
Yeah. For sure.
And it's actually happening. And I remember after the first edit of the movie, someone was like, "Oh man, Chris might be a little upset that the gun's going down a lot in the movie."
Yeah.
And I go, "Man, you run suppressed ARs as hard as you can run them. They're gonna have this problem or that problem.
It's true, 100%.
And if you show that the operator works through it, gets the gun back online,
What difference
and
does it
it's
make?
still running, hey, that's it, man.
So
That's
that's one of the things that I definitely dug, and
Cool.
you know, it was very much. I like the attention to detail there.
Cool.
That you know, like a lot of people might not see that because they're not necessarily the eye's not trained for that.
Sure.
So that was cool. I really dug it.
Cool.
But one of the other things too was that, correct me if I'm wrong,
Go
this
ahead.
was your first, first major foray into the tooth to tail of the movie.
Sure.
How was that?
Awesome.
Yeah.
When I was younger, dude, I watched a Chaplin movie. I love Chaplin movies. And I remember at the end of it, it came up and it was like music by Charles Chaplin, directed by Charles Chaplin. And he was doing his own stunts and all this shit. And I was like, you're allowed to do that? I was like,
You
oh
mean
my
I could do
God,
that shit?
that's what I want to do.
Interesting.
So it was always something I've been working towards, you know,
Yeah,
as
you
a
could see that in your
storyteller.
history. Yeah.
And in the movies that I've done, it really started, like I had trouble early on with people. Like I'd have an idea and I'd be like, oh, like if you were the director, I'd be like, oh, Jeff, I got this idea. What about this? And
Yeah.
a lot of times they're like, man, yeah, that's great, man. Just sit there and say your line. They shut you down because one thing or the other. One of the best experiences I've ever had was on Black Hawk. And I remember showing up, and it was the day I was going to show Randy fighting to the end.
Okay.
And I remember sitting in this fuselage, this huge Black Hawk wreck that they built as a set. And I was thinking about, like all the night before I was thinking about it, and that day I was thinking about it, how am I going to do it? And Ridley comes up. Ridley's such a stud. If he ever hears this, you're a stud, dude. Ridley comes up with his AD, Terry Needham. And he goes, to me, he goes, well, what do you think, mate? What do you want to do? And I go, oh, I got this idea, Ridley. I'm like, okay, I'm in the Black Hawk and I'm shooting with this gun. And then boom, I get hit and I drop that gun and I look and I pick up one of the other guns and I shoot this MP5, but I get hit in the back and then I go to my pistol and I pull it. I had this whole concept in my mind. And when I was done pitching it to him, right? He goes, I'll never forget this, brother. He goes, he's chewing on his cigar. He goes, sounds good. Terry, squib him up. And so I was like, well, fuck.
Because that's exactly how it went down in the movie.
That's what we're going to do. And they put these squibs on me, which are these like explosive blood packs to simulate bullet hits. And squibbed me up. We shot it once, but the squibs didn't work. So we re-wardrobed up. And that entire sequence that you see is the entire second take.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
One second take.
Yeah, man.
Dude, that was awesome. So you found that some directors were less.
Well, it was the first time, dude, that I was able to speak an idea, like express myself.
Yeah.
Like imagine your buds going, hey, what if we made them pick
Just shut
up
up and
that
do it.
fucking log?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like whoever came up with it, what do you guys call the log?
Log PT, just logs.
Yeah, like Old Maid or
I know.
there's some term.
Yeah,
or,
there's one for the bitch one
the,
that's out
the
there.
big one. Yeah.
I know.
So
what you
anyways,
mean.
like I don't know who it was that was like, dude, let's cut down a telephone pole and bring it out on the beach.
Yeah.
Whoever that was, brilliant idea, right?
Yep.
So this was the first time that I ever had the experience where I had an idea that was received and acknowledged.
Yeah.
And then we went with it and it was magic. And I was like, I think I got pretty decent ideas. And then so from that experience, I went into some other movies and I did a couple independent action films where I'd say the majority of the things that I did were just ideas I had. I said, well, what if I just dead check this dude when I'm walking by him?
Love it.
Things like that. And then I remember the director being like, no, man, that's too brutal. You can't do that.
And
I'm going,
wait a minute.
I'm like, dude, I think it's a smart idea. If I'm going to turn my back on this dude, shouldn't we make sure he's dead?
Yeah.
That type of stuff. So one of the things that is really important for me as a storyteller and sort of coming into becoming a director and a writer and a filmmaker is the tone of everything. So the tone of the music, the tone of the dialogue and the acting, the tone of the look of the film, the tone of the way the thing sounds, right? In most films, you know, even, I don't know if you've noticed this in Warhorse One, but all the gun sounds and everything, originally when the Foley artists brought the sounds, it was like all the guns were MP5 sounds. It was a strange thing. I think he didn't know much about guns. But so I had to go redo the entire sound design with real AK-47s, real suppressed ARs and things of that nature. But the difference is so massive.
Oh, yeah.
But most audience members wouldn't even notice.
Nope, absolutely
right?
not.
But I don't know about you, but one of the guys that came up last night was like, man, I don't know what it is, but that movie sounds real.
Yeah, dude, I can 100%, because the AK blasts in the building area, in those like the hallways, the open hallways. Yeah, the village. There you go.
Yeah.
The AK blast coming through there.
Yeah.
Legit.
Absolutely
legit. Because that shit rocks your world. It's
Yeah.
fucking loud.
Yeah.
And the way that the AR sounded suppressed was also spot on.
how it sounds, yeah.
I'm like, yep, that. I know that sound.
And it's one of those things, dude, Jeff, that I guarantee you might not even acknowledge. You just accept it because you go, yeah, that's what it sounds
normal.
like.
That's normal.
And then afterwards you process it and go, oh, wow, yeah, that did sound good.
You know, and it's funny too, because now that you mention it, I haven't paid as much attention to others.
Sure.
You know, but last night there was a part in the movie in the village where those AKs were coming on full on. You know, guys were moving forward and just the AK was blasting.
Yeah.
And I even said to myself, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
This is not what I've seen in the past.
Sure.
In other in other movies that I've seen. And I couldn't put my finger on it right away until we started talking right now. But it was the genuine nature of the sound that the AKs were making as they were in that confined space.
It's a different thing.
Totally different.
And Hollywood, they have something called sweeteners. Yeah, man.
Interesting.
Dropping some intel for you.
Yeah, you are. Give it to me.
So what they do is they sweeten the sound to make it sound better. And as a director and filmmaker, I don't want to sweeten anything.
Yeah.
Violence is horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're on the line with a bunch of people shooting guns, or people shooting guns at you, or you shooting guns, this is a horrible fucking situation. You know what I mean? There's nothing romantic about it. Yeah. There, you know, heroism is a tragic thing.
Yeah.
Right? I want the audience to experience that. I don't want to sweeten the gun sounds to make them sound better on your ear or nicer. I want you to walk out going, fuck, I just experienced a bunch of gunfights and I don't want to experience that again.
Yeah, it was funny because when those, you know, like there was even the AK sounds in like the frontier area, you know, that was genuine, but it was the confinedness of the AKs in the village that just is.
Well, they sound different.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Gunfire in the range, open range, is a different thing.
Exactly.
And I put these rapports in, right, where when somebody fires, you'll hear the actual audio of the gun going off, but then there's this natural gun report coming off of the mountainside.
Interesting.
And so I went up into the mountains and recorded a bunch of stuff and put it in the movie.
That's so fucking cool.
Yeah,
dude, that is awesome. And that was, again, one of the things that I was complimenting you on, which is the genuineness, the authenticity of what I saw last night. Now, when you started working on this movie, and I can't, you know, this movie touches on some heartstrings. Those that haven't seen it, no spoiler alerts. I don't want to get out.
It's not out yet.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into it, but that was kind of tough too. Like,
oh, bro, making the movie was brutal.
Yeah, I mean, just
draining.
And first of all, Athena was amazing. You were absolutely right. When you like, I was looking around. I'm looking for an adult. When you said that, I'm looking around trying to see. And then when you know, I walked by her and I saw her sitting right next to you, and I was like, wow, I'm not going to say she stole the show.
No, but the movie's about her.
Yeah, but
her character. I remember there was the impetus of the story was first off, right? I woke up about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And I said, you know, I'm sick of waiting for people to write scripts
Right.
and make movies that I'm interested in making, right? It's about time that I, you know, kick my own ass and do it. I have, it's a strange thing, dude. Like, responsibility is a motherfucker.
Amen.
And there's been years that have gone by where I was like, man, I don't want that responsibility. I'm almost more comfortable showing up and letting somebody else handle it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it's time to do this. And I knew I was going to be in front of the camera most of the time. So I contacted a guy I worked with on a couple other independent action films to kind of help me carry the movie while in directorial and producing duties.
Yeah, you had a lot of hats that you were wearing.
Oh, man. Unreal. Funny story about that at some point. But,
Good.
But yeah, so after that, once I made the decision to make a movie, I had an idea about an experience I had where I connected with someone, and I wanted to express that on film. I wanted to tell that story about what happens to a man before he makes that connection and after, who he is after that connection.
Why?
You know?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and so like that's I'm trying not to
we can't give away
I
too
know,
much,
I know. It's really hard. I'm
Stop.
trying to be very
Sorry,
careful
dude.
with my words. No, dude, this is good. This is a challenge for me. I gotta step up. And you know, you could tell, like, obviously you conveyed that in the movie, at least as far as I was concerned.
Sure.
I thought you did convey the you know, the before and the after.
Sure, yeah.
And I thought it came out really well. I was very happy with it. Did that kind of live up to the image that you had in your mind?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
When you were thinking about this.
Yeah, well, so originally the concept, right, was, and this was 2 years prior to the pullout of Afghanistan.
Right.
When I'm writing this. I
I
knew it, man. Yeah, if you look through history, anybody that knows a little bit of history can see things coming down the pipe, you know?
For sure.
You know what I mean? So
if you're paying attention.
Absolutely. And I was like, man, this is going to be a fuck situation. And what's going to happen to all these dudes and all these families and all these people that were like, oh yeah,
let's invest.
This, right?
Absolutely.
So anyways, I remember there was a National Geographic cover of this young girl in Afghanistan. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And she was the idea that I had of like, okay, this girl who's in this missionary family, who's half Afghani, half American, is the only survivor of this ambush on their family while they're trying to escape Afghanistan.
Right.
And my character and his team are sent in to try to escort them out of the area, and he loses his whole family. And
that hit me kind of hard right off the bat. I was like,
sorry,
dude,
sorry,
what
dude.
happened there? You know, it's like we're like sitting down and like not even 30 seconds in, I'm like, okay, how's this going to play out?
But see, this is, that's another thing about tone, brother, is it sets the tone of the movie.
Yes, it did.
And this is the thing is like, it's a tragic story. When I was making the film, like editing the film and scoring the film and stuff, man, it was brutal, dude. There were days where it was like after, 2 hours of working on this scene.
Yeah.
And I got tears in my eyes and my heart's just like crushed. I was like, man, I got to go watch Step Brothers or something. I got to go do something else. I had to remove myself because it's
the
tragic,
emotional,
man.
Yeah,
it's
that
tragic,
kind of.
Yeah.
Dude, that was not easy, but I think it did set the tone. And it's funny. That fall reminded me of a fall I took.
Dude.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Tell me about this.
So
I'm going to tell you something else.
We were doing train up for a mission. We never got tasked with a mission, but that didn't stop us from training for it. And the scenario was that this target site was on kind of like a finger that was surrounded by water, and the only way in was this road that came straight in. So obviously that's heavily protected. And the HVT is inside the compound, and the back side of the compound faced the ocean, and it had cliffs that climbed up.
Right.
And so we knew that we weren't going to be successful trying to sneak and peek through the front part where all their defenses were. So we were like, well, let's try it. Let's see if we can do this by scaling these cliffs.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
Old
so,
school.
Yeah. So my platoon at the time had some really good climbers. We spent our leisure time going out and rock climbing and doing stuff like that. So we had the talent to do it.
Right.
It's just whether or not we could make it happen. So the commands were like, well, go out and show us. Show us you can do it. So we found an area that was similar. It had about a 85-foot cliff. It was on the sea, right on the water. It was volcanic rock, which was a little different than the rock that we were going to be going up against. But
interesting.
What we did was we sent 3-man teams up, and basically you were trying out. If
how'd you get the rope to the top?
We did it. We climbed.
Oh, just free climbed.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
So we sent one lead climber up.
Right. Yeah.
And then he rolled down a caving ladder, and we just used the caving ladder up there.
Okay,
so,
okay.
So we sent up these guys, and they kind of like we went in shifts. So the first couple, there would be one team, they'd get debriefed, another team, they'd get debriefed, and my team, I think, was the last team. I'm pretty sure we were the last team.
Right.
And I had one of my best friends. He was the lead climber, and I had another guy who was one of my best friends. He was my corpsman, and I was kind of in the middle. And what we ended up doing was Noel climbed all the way up through the caving ladder down eventually, but we were getting hammered in the surf zone.
Oh, no.
Because when the surf would come in,
sure.
You're just getting pounded against the rocks, but when the surf would come out, you're hanging from the rocks.
Right.
So it was a shitty deal, basically. And we had to wait for all the other teams to go up. So we're just getting pounded. And finally, I told Gary, I'm like, fuck this. Let's just start climbing. We were both climbers. We both were lead climbers. So
well, you can catch the ladder once it comes down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we were like, that's kind of where my head was at. So we start climbing, and I'm like waiting for Noel to throw the ladder down. He's still having difficulties climbing out or whatever. So I'm like, fuck it. Let's just keep climbing. Because originally we did climb out of the water, and then I just said, fuck it. Let's just start climbing.
Why not? Yeah.
So I started climbing up, and my OIC is up there at the top, and there's a little lip. And he kind of looks over, and this little outcropping that you had to get over. And once you're over it, it's kind of easy. And he's like, what the fuck? He's like, what are you guys doing? We're like, well, we're just climbing. And he's like, well, can you see Gary? And I remember I hadn't bothered to look to see if Gary was following me. And
This is your corpsman?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I remember I had handholds on these kind of like volcanic rock nubs. And it was pretty easy climbing, to be honest. Like these big things.
Well, those are pretty grippy.
Yeah.
Lava rock is pretty grippy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I found was also very porous.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what ended up happening was I leaned away from the wall to look because there was that little lip that was blocking my view of Gary down below.
Right.
And when I leaned back, one of my grips broke off.
Oh, shit.
So I literally am looking at the rock in my hand.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what the fuck? And about that moment, the second grip broke. So then I start falling. So in the beginning, again, when the surf was in, there was water. When the surf was out, there was rock.
Oh, shit.
So I happened to fall and time the fall to where there was water.
Oh, wow.
Dude, that was like Providence.
Wow.
It was about a 65-foot fall.
I love how you said Providence.
Yeah, dude.
Because that's exactly the beginning of the movie. Is I don't know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And Washington used to use that term a lot.
Yeah.
George Washington.
Absolutely.
You know?
I mean, I had several of those moments through my career. Several of those moments that I just am like, you know what? I was blessed.
You don't know what it is, man.
Don't know what it is,
yeah.
and I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah,
I'm going
why
to take
not?
that opportunity. I'm going to keep moving forward.
Yeah, man.
So when I saw you fall,
Yeah.
Not going to say more than that.
Yeah.
That brought back memories.
Sure.
I was like, whew.
Yeah.
And that was,
you know what's funny is there's a buddy of mine, Johnny Premiano, and we text back and forth, and he runs a place called Courses of Action. I don't know if you've ever heard of those guys.
I think I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Primo. He's a good dude.
Yeah, actually, I do know Johnny.
Yeah, he's a good kid. Anyway, so I texted him the trailer of the movie. First thing he texts me back is, dude, did I ever tell you this story of when I fell off a mountain? It was like, and this was like part of the, the authenticity and the realism that you're talking about is the thing that I strive for as a storyteller is like, how do you make it authentic?
Yeah.
How do you make it real? How do you, when you say something to somebody, mean it?
Yeah. I totally do.
And throughout the film, that was always my approach to whatever hat I was wearing is, let's make this as authentic and true as possible.
Like I said, like right out of the gate, that's the first kind of like, that's the first clip, if you will.
Right.
And I'm thinking already, I'm like flashing back to when I fell.
Right.
And thinking about that. And, then obviously the story picks up from there.
Sure.
So I was like all in right away because I had that connection.
Right.
And it was like, I was like, fuck, what's going to happen from here? Because that seemed like when I was falling, all I can remember was I was yelling and screaming and just kind of like doing that wave, that arm wave that you were doing.
Right.
And, luckily I hit water. But
man, yeah, that's fortune, brother. Jeez.
Crazy.
And that's really one of the things. There's a couple stories that really were inspiring. Neil Roberts is a great story,
Fifi.
and Chapman, and Marcus. These are, as a human being, these are the circumstances of which everyone wakes up every day hoping to avoid.
Absolutely. Nobody wants that.
Right. I mean, of all the things, I mean, sure, you can get some life-threatening diseases or whatever the fuck it might be, but being dropped into enemy territory by yourself alone,
literally dropped.
Right. This is like, oh fuck, how's it going to get worse? You know what I mean?
I totally do.
And this is why I wanted to start the movie like that.
I think it was great. I mean, obviously, it was sad to see that you had lost the team,
man, it's brutal.
But at the same time, it did kind of set a precedence of sorts.
Sure. Well, again, war is hell.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices and tragedy that comes of it is brutal.
100%.
And
it affects everybody.
And this is, and one of the things that the film is about, I've put a lot of time into thinking about it. And that, and I'll tell you a story about my buddy Jamie. But the children are the ones that really bear the brunt of the shouldering of war, whether it be their fathers or mothers who are killed in combat, or they come back and they have issues about their time in combat. This is true tragedy.
It is. I mean, it's and having seen it, it is definitely.
It's brutal.
Gut-wrenching.
It's gut-wrenching.
It really is.
And this is one of the things that was important to me in telling that story is, not bullshitting people, not make it Hollywood, not sweeten it, like make it brutal.
Well,
and tell that story, but at the end, maybe interject, and I don't know if it's validated in real life, about hope. I still have hope, brother.
Yeah.
And that at the end of the film is, I guess, me hoping that there's fucking hope left in the world. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. I have a similar perspective. I want to believe. I want to hope in a sense. And I will do my part to make that part happen.
Yeah.
There's things out of my control and I accept that. But
Sure.
I still believe. I have that belief and I choose to live my life that way.
Sure.
And I think, people will make their own choices and whatnot, but you're right. The atrocities of war.
It's brutal.
And I always try to remind people of this. I'm like, hey, listen, like war is not a casual event. War, like when we've become, for 20 years, we as a society, we became a little bit acclimated to it.
Oh, sure.
Too much, in my opinion, because we should not ever want to be in war.
By design, I think.
Exactly. War should always and and I lay the blame primarily on our politicians
Sure.
and the inability to negotiate the right path. And because when negotiations fail, the only course of action that you have is force. And that's where the military comes in.
The strange thing, dude, is I can't help but think the financial interests.
Well, there is that too. I'm not going to
people
lie.
Involved.
War is
because war has rules. It's a business.
Yep.
And just like we were talking earlier about jiu-jitsu, and fighting, right?
Yeah.
We shake hands on the fact that I'm not going to bite your nose off.
Appreciate that.
I'm not going to bite your ear off.
Yep.
I'm not going to try to gouge your eyes out. I'm not going to try to rip your balls off. There's an agreement in our training.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, if we go to war in the street, I'm going to eat your face while I'm choking you out and clapping your cheeks. So it's all going to happen at once.
That's a pretty image.
But that said, right, the training aspect has the rules, right? It has the agreement. And I think it's strange that modern warfare has these agreements because it would seem to me, right? Let's say we're going to go to war, right? Shouldn't it be we're going to decimate everything and turn it to ash if we don't agree on this?
So when you study history,
yeah,
that's what history tells us.
Oh, yeah.
That you do not want to go to war.
Yeah, Carthage is a perfect example of it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And which is why it's that much more important for politicians to be doing a better job of diplomacy and working the problem and finding a solution.
Sure.
Because I think sometimes we're just too quick to send in a peacekeeping force, or we're too quick to, in this
There's
case,
so much money involved, Jeff. There's so much fucking money involved.
I am not naive enough to know that there's that as well. But that's
if we removed that, let's say we removed money altogether, right?
Exactly.
We made politicians volunteer, right? It's volunteer only. No one's getting paid. No one's getting stocks. No one's getting nothing.
Yep.
A lot of the type of people that are attracted to that will change.
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it'd be like overnight. It'd be like, I'm out of here. See ya.
Right.
But that's an important distinction to make. It's like I'm more sensitive these days than I was when my younger years. And like the way I look at it is like,
why do you think that?
I think because
were you quicker to be cool with going to war, or were you quicker to be understanding of the tool of war?
That's exactly how I looked at it. It's like, okay, I believed that the reason why I was being employed was because diplomacy had failed. And it is my job to reconcile that and bring it back to balance.
Right.
And then I realized that that wasn't always the case, that sometimes diplomacy was just, okay, it didn't work out the way we wanted it to, so we're just going to do this and we're going to, and I always, I believed for the longest time that if we choose a path to war, then you need, as a politician, to sit down and wait until war is over, until we have reached the objectives. Do not
100%.
Do not reinvest yourself.
The other thing is, I'd say,
because I want you to realize it's ugly.
Well, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about Washington being a general, right? Right, he was a general Washington.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So the interesting thing about that is, I would say, if a politician is going to put pen to paper and put young men's lives on the line, they should do the same with their own.
It's interesting because
I don't know. Maybe that's a hard reality, or maybe that's something that somebody goes, well, you still need the politicians. What if he gets killed and this and that? Maybe they wouldn't sign that paper.
If there is something there though. There is the fact that they don't have any skin in the game.
And listen, brother, the people that actually have the skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
Dudes like you, families, children, wives, mothers, fathers. I mean, this is the thing, man. These dudes will swing this fucking pen so fast.
Yes.
And
that's my problem.
It's a troubling thing.
And here's where I got up in arms about that is like, okay, if you're gonna like, in case of war, break glass, if you are breaking glass at this point, then you acknowledge that you failed.
Sure.
And at this point, it is up to me and
Well, that's what it should be. It should be, if we are going to unsheath the sword,
yes,
then heads will roll. And until it is resolved.
Yeah.
Not, hey, yeah, we're gonna, use you guys as fodder up until a point to where it's no longer financially beneficial for us in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And now we're just gonna say sorry. We're just now
moving on to the next one.
Moving on. I mean, there's a great documentary about the Korangal Valley. Restrepo. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah.
About Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Man,
I only saw parts of it.
It's just a brutal watch because you see the bureaucracy of how bullshit taking this fucking valley or this mountain or this area is, losing all these beautiful young men, destroying people's families, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to give it away.
Yes. So
Man, come on.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that bothered me.
Oh, fuck, man.
Is like, what was our objective? Like, I feel like
what was it worth? What was the trade? This is often a thing I say in fighting, right? If you're going to do something, always remember you're trading something.
Good point.
Right?
Absolutely.
So is it worth the trade? Is what you're going to do worth the trade?
That is spot on, because then you have your perspective. You are taking and you're making a more informed decision about that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you put politicians on the battlefield, right? That's a strange thing, but it's like, how do you get these individuals that are callously making decisions for other people? You know what I mean?
So that is a good question.
How do you solve that conundrum?
Well, first of all, we would need a lot more. We need a lot more data in our cameras to go over that, because that's going to take a long time. But that's the kind of those are the types of questions that I feel like we need to be asking as a nation and as a public.
100%.
Because, you're right. Maybe politicians don't belong in the battlefield, but I do believe in one thing, which is those that have served on the battlefield should be in politics.
Well, here's the thing, right? So imagine I never rolled, never fought, never did anything, but I came into a class and said, I'm going to teach you how to fight. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody might go along with it in the weird snake oil martial arts world, right? Where I just do magic fucking shit and people roll over. But there's going to be some people that are going, wait a minute, you've never fucking thrown a punch at anybody, never been hit in the face, never rolled, never got choked, never did a tournament, never did this, never did. Why the fuck am I listening to you? You know what I mean?
That's the thing. But I also feel like they're much more reserved about pulling the trigger on war.
Well, I'll tell you what. My thing to my guys is avoid the fight, bro. Don't, if you get mad at something. I remember my boy Garrett came to the house one day and he's all fucking amped up, like, fire in his chest. Amped. Man, this guy at work, he came up to me. And I said, hey, man, what's up? And he just like bumped my shoulder and walked by. I was like, man, I didn't do anything to this dude.
Yeah.
Whatever. And as he was walking away, I said, hey, man, what's your problem? And he said, yeah, fuck you. And he got in his car and left or something like that. And Garrett was just heated about it. You know what I mean? Which I totally understand. I'm like, my journey in life is always like the Bruce Banner.
Don't make me angry. Don't make me angry.
Is the constant controlling of the Hulk rage.
Yeah.
And in my experience as a martial artist and a teacher and a practitioner, I tell my guys, avoid it. Avoid it. Avoid it. And it's the old adage of easier said than done is, even for myself, man, I find myself just, there's a mantra I have, dude, and it's breathe, relax, it's okay.
Smart.
Breathe, relax, it's okay.
I run into the same problems with in my trade with folks that want to try, that are considering carrying a firearm for self-defense and deadly force. And I always try to warn them. I'm like, hey, man, this should be your last ditch option.
100%.
You need have
The consequences of letting that bullet out that barrel, brother.
big time.
That's
And
a lot of responsibility, like we talked about.
It's not as simple as it sounds, you know. So like, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions there, but I try to relay the same point. Like, you know, like road rage, you know, whatever happens in your workplace, you know, stuff like that. You've got to learn how to, and it's like you said, easier said than done.
Sure,
You've got to learn how to just let that stuff just flow, you know, let that pass you by. It's not, you know, it doesn't benefit you.
The journey should be avoiding conflict and at the same time being ready
Absolutely.
to face it head on.
So true.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing about the warfighter is that they know what war is.
Sure.
And they understand war. And so they're the ones that are more likely to want to avoid war. I get it. I really do. But that's the other thing, too, that I really appreciated about the film was that, you know, you're trying to convey that story and do it in a way that I think more people can appreciate. Rather than, you know, like it's not easy to try to document, if you will, war.
Yeah.
But the way that you did it, I thought was genuine.
Thank you.
And I think other people are going to enjoy it. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Johnny, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks to all the folks that are holding the line. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzales, and you're listening to the Bulletproof Workshop Podcast. Take care. Stay safe. Adios.